A father found a memo he was never meant to see. It sat near the bottom of a stack of routine palace correspondence, tucked beneath invitations and scheduling updates. Cream-colored paper, heavy stock, the kind that absorbs ink without bleeding, the kind reserved for documents that expect to be filed, not questioned. William pulled it free. Across the top, stamped in institutional capitals, the words proposed debut timing. Charlotte's name appeared halfway down the page. A proposed date had been typed in clean, serif font for her first major public appearance. Every logistical detail was filled in: venue, security briefing, press positioning, arrival sequence, and at the bottom, where a father's signature should have been, the space was blank. Someone else's office had drafted the schedule for his daughter's debut. William turned the memo over. On the reverse, a routing stamp. The document had not come from his household. It had originated from the Queen Consort's coordination office. Camilla's team had proposed the timing for when Charlotte, William's 11-year-old daughter, would step into public life for the first time. The memo had bypassed family conversation entirely. No quiet word from a grandmother preceded it. No phone call, no family dinner, no gentle suggestion made across a drawing room while the children played upstairs. A formal institutional document had landed in a correspondence stack, ready to be processed, deciding when a father's child would face cameras. William set the routing stamp closer to the light and read it again. The date confirmed the memo had been circulated before anyone in his household had been consulted. The coordination office had not asked whether Charlotte was ready. It had proposed a date and waited for compliance. His jaw tightened. He set the memo down on the desk, aligned it carefully with the edge, and sat very still. The room was silent except for the ticking of a mantel clock he normally never heard. His hand rested on the paper, palm flat, fingers spread. He did not pick it up again for a long time. This is a story about a promise every parent holds sacred. You decide when your child is ready. Not a committee, not a convention, not an office with a different name on the door. William and Catherine had kept that promise for over a decade. From the moment George was born, they controlled every appearance, every photograph, every public moment. When Charlotte arrived, the same rule applied. When Louis followed, nothing changed. No child walked out before both parents said yes. No institution overrode the nursery. That was not a casual preference. It was not a negotiating position that softened under pressure. It was a pattern held firm across 11 years of carefully managed royal childhood, visible in every controlled appearance, every denied photo request, every press arrangement that went through the parents and only the parents. The world watched them hold that line, appearance after appearance, year after year. The promise was parental authority. The clock had been running for 11 years, long enough to raise 3 children through every milestone the cameras wanted, long enough to build the habit so deeply into the household that it felt like instinct. Long enough, in other words, to prove the promise was not a phase. And now somebody was testing it. William requested the full convention documentation. He wanted to see the entire chain. Who drafted the protocol? Who approved it? Which offices had input? Which children it covered? The answers arrived within 2 days, and each one widened the wound. His staff brought the documents into his study. William read them standing at the window, afternoon light falling across the pages. His back was to the door. The traffic on the grounds below carried on, but the room itself had gone quiet. The particular quiet of someone who has stopped hearing anything outside his own thoughts. The scheduling input was not limited to Charlotte's debut. It covered all future public appearances for all 3 children, every school visit, every balcony appearance, every charity moment where George, Charlotte, or Louis might stand before a camera lens. This was no longer about one memo on one desk. The first discovery had threatened a single event, Charlotte's debut. The second threatened the whole architecture of parental authority itself. A system had been built, quietly and procedurally, around William's children, and it had been built without William's knowledge or his consent. William's back straightened as he absorbed the scope. His breathing stayed controlled, but his voice, when he finally spoke to his staff, carried no warmth at all. That was worse than anger. That was a father who had stopped asking questions and started making decisions. The convention touched something deeper than scheduling. William's mother had fought to control how her children appeared in public. She had understood before anyone else in the family that a child's first encounter with the cameras is not a performance. It is a threshold. And who controls that threshold controls the child's relationship with public life for years afterward. The convention had quietly claimed that threshold from the next generation of parents, without asking and without notice. He moved from the window to the desk. He spread the convention pages flat across the surface, 3 sheets of scheduling protocol, coordination requirements, routing authorities. The overhead light hummed against the silence. The paper smelled faintly of toner. He read every clause, every approval chain, every line of procedural language designed to make institutional scheduling feel inevitable rather than chosen. Then he chose a date. William signed an alternative scheduling document for Charlotte's debut. He did not run the date through the institutional coordination process. He did not request input from any office other than his own household. His pen touched the paper once. No consultation, no coordination request, no institutional input sought. His signature sat dark and certain where the blank space had been. Camilla's office objected within days. They cited the timing protocol. They referenced calendar coordination and the importance of avoiding conflicts with established royal events. They sent formal word that the proper procedure required a coordination review before any date could be confirmed. William's response was silence, not angry silence, administrative silence. He simply did not reply to the coordination request. He did not acknowledge the objection, dispute it, or explain his position. The signed date stood on a father's authority alone, and the father offered nothing more. The father's hand signed it, and no convention could unsign it. But the institution was not finished, and this is where the story turns into something more dangerous than a scheduling dispute. A convention does not survive through force. It survives by making itself look reasonable, and the palace communications office understood exactly how to make a protective father look like a difficult man. A statement appeared within days. It was brief, measured, and devastatingly well-aimed. It did not mention the convention memo. It did not reference Camilla's scheduling authority. It did not acknowledge that a coordination protocol existed at all. It simply noted, as if in passing, that the date William had chosen for Charlotte's appearance happened to coincide with an important institutional calendar event. The implication was surgical. William was not protecting his daughter. He was being stubborn. He was choosing personal preference over sensible coordination. He was, without the statement ever quite saying so, being selfish. A father putting himself ahead of the family he claimed to serve. The narrative turned with the efficiency of a well-run press operation. Commentary fell into line with the palace position. A father acting alone looked like a father acting recklessly. The institutional calendar conflict gave every reasonable observer a reason to side with convention. After all, why not simply pick a different date? Why not run it through the coordination office? Why not be reasonable? The convention asked for nothing outrageous. It asked for cooperation. And William, by refusing to cooperate, appeared to be the one creating the conflict where none needed to exist. This was the near victory. The convention almost won, not through authority but through framing. The palace had done what institutions have always done best. It made the challenger justify his disruption, while the system justified nothing at all. William's chosen date looked arbitrary, stubborn, pointlessly confrontational. The convention's preferred timing looked sensible, orderly, professional. An observer with no context would have sided with the institution in a heartbeat. That was the point. That was always the point. For a narrow, dangerous window, the institution held the high ground. Public sympathy leaned toward the calendar, toward coordination, toward the grown-up thing to do. The convention did not need to defeat William outright. It only needed to make his position look petty long enough for the institutional alternative to become the default. That is how conventions win. They outlast the objection. And parental authority, 11 years of it, carefully built and fiercely held, hung on a single question. A question nobody in the press or the palace seemed willing to ask. Why should a father have to justify choosing when his own daughter meets the world? William did not answer the palace statement. He did not engage the framing. He did not explain, defend, or negotiate. He did something quieter and more permanent. He prepared to lock the date. His staff drafted a final scheduling confirmation. William reviewed the language himself. Every sentence had been stripped of deference. There was no consultation request. No invitation for feedback. No procedural courtesy extended to any coordination office. The document was a locked schedule. The date was fixed. The authority cited was a father's household, nothing more. The routing bypassed every coordination office in the institution. If someone wanted to object, they would find no mechanism in the document that allowed it. William read the final document in his study that evening. The house was quiet. The children were in bed. The desk lamp threw warm yellow light across the page, and the curtains were drawn against the grounds outside. Charlotte's school photograph stood in a silver frame near the corner of the desk. A girl with her mother's composure and her father's quiet resolve, looking straight into the camera the way her parents had taught her. His fountain pen lay uncapped beside a glass of water that had gone still. The room smelled of old wood, polished leather, and the faint warmth of the lamp. William picked up the pen. His shoulders settled forward and his chin dropped half an inch. The gesture of a man who has stopped deliberating and started acting. No hesitation, no ceremony, no glance toward the phone. He signed. Charlotte stood ready on the morning of her debut. 11 years old. Her dress had been chosen by her parents. Her hair was arranged the way Catherine preferred. Simple, clean, brushed back from the forehead. Not styled for cameras, styled for a child stepping into something real. She held her hands in front of her, still and composed, the way children do when they sense the weight of a moment they do not fully understand, when they know it matters to the people they trust. The morning light came through tall windows and fell across the carpet in long, pale rectangles. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opened and closed. Staff moved quietly in the hallways. The schedule was set. The time was approaching. William stood beside her. He had dressed carefully, the way fathers dress when they know the day matters more than the suit. The signed schedule was folded in his jacket pocket. He could feel the edge of the paper through the fabric. Between their household and the institution, the convention memo sat unsigned on a desk in a coordination office. It would stay there. It had never been signed. It never would be. The father's hand signed it, and no convention could unsign it. Charlotte walked out on the date her father chose. She stepped through the doorway and into the light. The cameras found her immediately. Steady, quiet, composed beyond her years. Her posture carried the careful stillness her mother had practiced with her. Her expression held the warmth her father had told her mattered more than formality. She had been prepared by people who loved her, not by a scheduling office, not by a coordination protocol, by her parents. The debut belonged to the family, the date belonged to the father, and both belonged to Charlotte. The debut was locked. The convention was bypassed. And William understood the price he had paid to make it happen. He had publicly overridden institutional convention. Every future appearance for George, Charlotte, and Louis would carry this precedent. Every scheduling request from the coordination office would arrive in the long shadow of what William had done here. He had established that a father's household outranked the institutional calendar. William had won Charlotte's debut. But he had also drawn a line that could never be undrawn. Future flexibility was the cost of present authority. The next time a coordination memo arrived for George's schedule, it would arrive already knowing the answer. The father had overridden the process before. He would do so again. Every father who shields his children from the system becomes, to the system, the next problem to be managed. William would carry that weight forward into every scheduling conversation for years to come. A father does not override an institution quietly. The receipt always has his name on it. Now, in fairness, the convention had a defensible purpose. Institutional calendars exist for real and practical reasons. Royal appearances overlap, compete for press attention, and stretch security resources thin. When two senior royals appear on the same day, both events lose coverage. When a debut competes with a state occasion, the press splits its attention, and the public loses context. A coordination protocol that prevents those conflicts is not hostile in itself. It is, in most circumstances, the reasonable thing to do. If this were only about logistics, ensuring a debut did not collide with a state banquet, the convention would be unremarkable. It would be sensible. Any parent in William's position might welcome it. Coordination is not control. Scheduling is not sovereignty. There is nothing sinister about making sure two important events do not fall on the same afternoon. And Camilla's office, in administering the protocol, was performing a function that someone in the institution had to perform. Royal calendars do not manage themselves. If this were that story, there would be no verdict to deliver. But this was never only about logistics. The protocol did not apply equally across the institution. It applied specifically to William's children. And here is where the defense falls apart. Not because the purpose was wrong, but because the origin was. The timing convention was not an ancient protocol. It was not a tradition inherited from the late Queen. It was not a practice rooted in decades of established coordination. The convention had been introduced the year Camilla became Queen Consort, not tradition, installation, a scheduling authority created for a new office and applied to one specific set of children. When William pulled back the institutional fabric, the stitching was fresh. That is the detail that collapses everything the defense had built. A protocol with no history before one person's elevation is not a tradition. It is a preference given procedural weight. Look at the two documents side by side. One carries a father's signature, placed deliberately, on a date chosen by the two people who know his daughter best. The other carries an institutional routing stamp, originated by an office that did not exist when Charlotte was born. The audience does not need instruction on which one belongs in a filing cabinet. A preference, however carefully dressed in institutional language, does not override a father. So here is the verdict. It is a narrow one. The promise was parental authority, a father's right to decide when his daughter faces the world. That promise was made visible over 11 years, kept through every milestone, tested by every camera request and press demand, and then it was tested by a convention that arrived quietly, dressed itself in procedure, and assumed it would never be questioned. William questioned it. William overrode it. William paid the price. The convention memo never needed a signature because it never deserved one. A father's word, a locked date. Charlotte stands at her debut, poised, composed, on the date her father chose. Behind her, the institution carries on. Ahead of her, the cameras hold steady, and on a desk in a coordination office, a cream-colored memo gathers dust. Heavy stock, stamped with proposed timing across the top. Unsigned, irrelevant. The father's hand signed it, and no convention